Welcome, listener, to another episode of Spam Humbug. This is episode 146 of the podcast, and we actually had a topic for this one, which we did eventually get to. We discussed things like Corvin and Neverwinter Nights, Enhanced Edition, and some game engines that were popular in the RPG space in like the late 90s and the early aughts. We talk about Ultima Underworld, Ultima 9, and how the 3D games that followed them were in some ways actually a bit of a technological step back. But we also, concede that there are a lot of complexities to doing in 3D what you would expect from an Ultima game. We talk about a few other games, Revenant, The Sims, Ultima Online 2, and some of the various proposals, EA's cold feet about doing any sort of sequels to Ultima Online, Twinson's Odyssey. We talk about that weird little era kind of in the late 90s and early aughts where voxels were all of the rage. And then we eventually get to the actual topic, which is Outward. That was a game proposed as a discussion point by Clortos Dragon, which in his mind at least, kind of encapsulates what Shroud of the Avatar should have been. Competent single-player experience that fades in and out with multiplayer, including support, by the way, for couch co-op. It's an Unreal Engine-based game. It also saves in real time as you play through it, so there's no save scumming. And the big conceit in Outward is that you're just some ordinary adventurer. You're not an avatar or a demigod or anything. You are like just this exceedingly basic person. It has been compared to Dark Souls, but it's apparently not that hardcore, although it is, a little bit more difficult. It does have some of the survival game trappings that are becoming popular in a bit of a niche way these days. Anyways, Clortos thought it was, very Shroud of the Avatar-like and had some callouts to Ultima as well. So he really wanted to discuss it, and we do pick it apart a little bit in the middle of the episode. Before we move on to topics like Scum VM and how it's been hoovering up Ultima engines lately, Kingdoms of Amalur Re-Reckoning, Commander Keen. We talk a lot about Commander Keen, the Commander Keen series, and then some of the other PC platformers that came out in sort of the late 80s and then early 90s. Captain Comic. Did you ever play Captain Comic? It's an interesting one. And then we kind of close out the episode with a little bit more review of Outward. So, mixed bag, but we did actually have a topic this time, so that's awesome. And of course, as always, we are hosted on Anchor.fm, a newer and more social podcast hosting platform. You can find us at Anchor.fm/SSSH podcast or at spamhumbug.com. And if you're listening to us on the Anchor app, please do consider liking the podcast, liking individual episodes, and of course, sharing them with your social media circles. As always, this episode of Spam Humbug is brought to you by our Patreon backers, patreon.com/Ultima Codex if you want to join that crew. Thank you to everybody who supports the podcast and the Ultima Codex by that means. And as always, a hearty thank you to our co-producers, Seth, Golden Flame, Chris, Dominic, Violation, Helgrove, Gronk, Pascal, and Thor1. All right, let's get on with the show. And there's the bot.
Oh.
Whoa, that was cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you've never met the bot, have you?
No, it's been quite a while since I've been a part of one of these, so...
Hey, Rothbard, I don't think we've talked before. At least not on voice.
Not over audio. No. So,
also known as Clortos Dragon.
Oh.
Yes, of infamy. Sorry, I'm really bad at, making myself laugh, so...
No,
yeah.
So, if you were ever following the Ultima 9 Redemption project before Corv took over the Titans of Aether aspect of that...
Drove it into the ground.
Well, to be fair, Avatus tried to.
I'm joking. Yes. It was going into the ground regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes changing pilots might make the crash more interesting, but it doesn't really do anything else.
Yeah. I don't really have. I don't know. I'm kind of glancing at Corbin from time to time, and I'm mildly interested, but not really. It's just sort of like, I don't know. Kudos to him for trying to make something that's hopefully can be profitable for him. I'll say that.
I've messed around with the alphas that he's released, and I mean he's he's got something going there. He does. So
maybe I need to try that. I just haven't given that a shot yet.
I don't know if he released it to non-backers, but
okay, there you go.
Yeah, but I mean he's got something going there, and it's I mean, as with many such things, alphas being alphas, there's a long way to go. But like you can definitely see the core of what he's trying to do, and there is some promise there. So we'll see. We'll see.
Cool.
So, anyways, yeah, that's. I was actually trying to get him on the podcast here in the near future, but it's not always easy to get in touch with the guy. So, we'll see.
Where is he from? Is he from like? I can't remember where that guy's from.
Well,
it's so weird. Like, go ahead.
He's U.S. based now. I think he may have been. I think he's from Germany. I suspect at any rate that he's from Germany, but he's U.S. based now.
So that's the interesting thing about the early internet. It was much easier to like converse with people that you really had no idea where they were from.
What, before all of our devices were tracking our location 24/7?
Yes, yeah, particularly that.
Yeah. Well, you're not wrong.
So yeah, no, I did fire up Neverwinter Nights. I hope that doesn't distract too much, or if you want me to shut that off, I can. I don't care.
Which Neverwinter Nights are we talking about? Are we talking about the multiplayer gold box, or are we talking about the
No. I'm not that cool. This is the enhanced edition. Basically one of you guys linked that they had improved the graphics, and so I just reinstalled it. Been a while since I played it, so I had to kind of start over. Yeah, and I'm doing the main campaign, which I'm totally not into, but like I kind of feel like I should just do the main campaign anyway. It's like the story about a plague in the town or something, and
I think
one of those things where I'm like, I don't care about what I'm doing, but it's a fun game to play.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I mean, okay, like I struggled to play Neverwinter Nights at the best of times because it's like, I mean, I've talked on the podcast at length about like my issues with the Aurora engine combat, and Neverwinter Nights is the Aurora engine. Like that was the OG. So the combat
the numbers flying over the head. You're not a big fan of that, right?
You know what? I mean, okay, the numbers flying over the head, like I don't care so much about that. There's other games that use that conceit, and it's not a big deal to me. It's just the combat feels very, I'm too aware of the mathematical mechanics of the combat.
Like the big pauses between each strike. That's
exactly.
That's a bit distracting.
Exactly. It's very jarring to me to actually like be able to see visually, and again, I don't even care about the numbers that are flying around themselves. It's just the whole visual of combat in most Aurora engine games and their derivatives. And this includes KOTOR, this includes the original Dragon Age.
I was about to mention Dragon Age felt like an Aurora engine game.
It is.
Oh yeah,
they kept iterating. The last game built on this engine, granted a very late iteration of it, was Dragon Age 2.
Well, they did the same with the Infinity engine. How many different games came out of the Infinity engine?
That's true. Although, like, the Infinity engine didn't change a ton game to game, right? Like, Neverwinter Nights to KOTOR to Dragon Age 2. There were significant overhauls in the engine each time, but it was only with Dragon Age 2 that they finally actually got around to making the combat palatable.
To be fair, I'm reminded of one thing they did with the Infinity engine, specifically a fan project, Icewind Gate 2, basically trying to get Baldur's Gate 2 to run through the Icewind Dale 2 engine. So they had edition rules and such.
I can't do. The sad thing is I can't do Infinity engine games anymore. I actually prefer, what the engine does with Neverwinter Nights. Like I like that a little bit better. The fact that you can click and drag to move around, that's actually, this sounds really weird and stupid, but like Ultima 7, I think is so built into my psyche that is just inherently appealing to me.
The combat in Ultima 7 is a mess.
Well, sure, yeah. Yeah. But that's not the point of the game, really. Like, I've never been a big fan of RPG combat. So, like, that's why I hate the Final Fantasy games, because it's like let's take Ultima and let's take all the fun exploration out of it and all the interesting things with the characters and all the neat NPCs and the interesting storyline. Let's just rip all that out. And while we're at it, we're going to take away your ability to see monsters on the overworld. They're just going to come up out of nowhere. That's what Final Fantasy feels like to me. And maybe that's kind of harsh because a lot of people really love it. So, more power to them. But yeah, I guess I'm just like, I mean, again, it's a situation where like not every Ultima fan has the same interests, huh?
Well, the RPG space is wide enough, definitely, that it can cater to a lot of different interests, which is probably a good thing. I know Harmony's a big fan of some of the Final Fantasy games.
Some of them not so much.
Fair enough.
I mean, I'll say this for Final Fantasy, like fantastic music and soundtracks. I love the music. I remember when I was in high school, I like ordered online to get the Final Fantasy Symphonic CD, and it was such a mind-blowing thing to hear 8-bit music, in an orchestral setting. That was what was particularly cool to me. And now that's so commonplace, but like back then it was very, very rare.
Well, and coming back to what you were saying about like the Infinity Engine, like for me, I mean, I can play Icewind Dale because it's a little bit more action oriented, but I struggled too with the Infinity Engine games. And my main struggle, and this also coming out of the Ultima milieu, is, and I mean, to be fair, I actually have this objection too to like a lot of Neverwinter Nights, and a lot of games, sort of the early to middle 2000 to 2010 3D games. Heck, I could even, put this shot across Reckoning's bow a little bit. But like, especially with the Infinity Engine games, the worlds are painfully static, right? Mm-hmm. Like you were literally just moving across a gorgeous painting.
Oh yeah.
And there was absolutely
Very
nothing
flat.
you could do with anything that you see in the painting.
Right. It's frustrating. It's like growing up with Ultima. Like now, I mean, I'll say this, like in the 90s, we didn't have anything else. I mean, that was pretty much, if you didn't want to just keep replaying Ultimas, it was like, well, here's Baldur's Gate. And it was popular.
True.
And I think a lot of the production value at the time, I think that was a lot of the pull. It was like, there's the music is well done. I mean, it's not an ugly game, but
no, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's well written, and the music, like you say, is great. Of course, you have to like novels to play Baldur's Gate.
Right. Lots of reading. And but at the same time, like it did give you sort of a, when you're trying to like make friends and figure out who plays D&D and not, it gave you an in because a lot more people knew about Baldur's Gate than Ultima. If they knew about Ultima, it was maybe Ultima Online. And some of the people that used to play Ultima Online that I would run into, I would be like, I wouldn't really want to hang out with them. I hope that comes across the right way. But just in my circle of experience, that's just me.
Yeah, a little bit.
I probably just made some enemies, but
the Ultimate Dragons is a very large club too. So yeah, we have all types here.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Just I liked, I think it was an important step in RPGs, just like Neverwinter Nights was an important step in RPGs, just like Dungeon Siege was an important step in RPGs. But it's kind of one of those things, I have this, literally, there are 2 Ultima games, and both of them touch on 3D technology. And my main criticism, not of the games themselves, but of what followed, is that what followed, by comparison, was a setback. The first of these is Ultima Underworld. And I know I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but if you think about Ultima Underworld predated Castle Wolfenstein, right? And in terms of technology was significantly more advanced of an engine than Castle Wolfenstein. Of course, it also ran way slower.
By all rights, it should have become the standard.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it ran way slower. Like Wolfenstein ran like a hot knife through butter on just about anything. But yeah, Underworld had a way more advanced engine, and it would have been awesome if that had kind of become the springboard for the 3D games that followed, right? I think that, Wolfenstein kind of coming to dominate that early 3D FPS market set things back a few years in terms of, where the technology went. And likewise, I kind of feel this way about Ultima 9 and some of the 3D games that followed it, right? Because if you look at what was possible with the Ultima 9 engine. And I mean, like, granted, okay, you know, sure, we can, you know, let's bracket out the bugs and let's bracket out the complaints about the scale of the world that some people have. And let's just look at, you know, what the engine could actually do, what the engine was actually capable of. Which is to say that, you know, you had a 3D RPG engine circa 1999, which was capable of a true open world experience. You walk into a dungeon, there's no load screen. You walk into a building, there's no load screen. You walk out of the dungeon again on the far side, there's no load screen. And having walked into the dungeon at one end and out of the dungeon at the other end, you can turn on the fly cheat and literally fly back to the start of the dungeon over the 3D world, you know, like the intervening space in the 3D world. But now at the, you know, like it was such a long time. It was years after Ultima 9 that we saw even the first hints of that stuff coming back, you know, and even now, you know, like even something like, you know, as groundbreaking as like Skyrim is, you know, vanilla Skyrim, granted, gives you a huge world, but it's not as truly open as Ultima 9's is, in the sense that, you know, if I walk into a town and then into a building in Skyrim, I get a load screen. Vanilla Skyrim isn't just to finish the thought, you know, vanilla Skyrim isn't as manipulable, right? I can't just pick up a barrel and move it around. I can't break the barrel and all of a sudden have, you know, 2 or 3 3D objects that I can arrange into a staircase, things like that.
No, but you can take a bucket, put it over somebody's head, and they won't see you stealing everything they own.
Right.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, whatever. But
and then you can sell it back to them if they're a shopkeeper.
So, but yeah,
it's
like that's
a very
just
deep game.
And I mean, again, like Skyrim has a lot going for it, but like just in terms of where 3D RPG technology was literally at the turn of the century with Ultima 9, very few, really, if any, maybe none of the 3D RPGs that followed it, that went anywhere, that, you know, sort of set any standards for what a 3D RPG was, did really anything that it was attempting to do, right? And Neverwinter Nights is a good example of that because, you know, Neverwinter Nights is all area based, definitely not an open world game. You would never, you know, it's just one loading screen after another to go into a building, to go from one area to another. You know, if you're actually trying to build something that feels like a continent to traverse in Neverwinter Nights, you maybe have to lay down 20 areas and then define all of your transition triggers between them, right? And it's just one loading screen after another to actually navigate from one end of the continent to the other.
And some modern MMOs still do that.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to be fair, you know, with MMOs, it makes a little bit more sense because you, in theory, might have to fit thousands of players into a single zone, right? But for a single-player game, it's a little bit harder to defend. And again, that's another shot that I could even put across Reckoning's bow, right? I really wish Reckoning was purely open world. Maybe the engine just didn't quite support it. The zones in Reckoning are pretty darn massive, and they're pretty darn massive in most MMOs. But yeah, it's not quite the same experience as you get, you know, as you can find in Britannia in Ultima 9, which, you know, if I were pitching a 3D RPG to you today that had a true open world where there were no loading screens, you transition into and out of dungeons, no loading screens, you just walk right in and keep going. There's no loading screens as you go into buildings. As you're inside a building, you can see dynamic environment outside the building. I'll just stop myself there because that already sounds pretty damn advanced and a lot cooler than anything we have today.
Well, I mean, does it just come down to computing power or GPU power? I'm just wondering.
Some of it.
It's the coding, right? I mean,
it's more the coding.
People back.
It's more the coding. Like even something simple like being able to walk into a building without facing a loading screen. Well, that's all well and good until you try and then have, say, dynamic weather, which Ultima 9 did have, right? Like it would rain in Ultima 9. And even something like getting it to rain everywhere but inside the building, that's tricky. That's trickier in a 3D engine. It's relatively easy to have, you know, a movable barrel in a 2D engine, like Ultima 6, like Ultima 7. But now all of a sudden you're in a 3D engine. Well, now there's additional positionality that you have to track for that barrel. And with, of course, Ultima 9, they decided to go one step further because why shouldn't you be able to break the barrel? Of course you should be able to break the barrel. Well, now you've just turned one 3D object into 3 3D objects, each of which can be individually manipulated, and the game now has to track all of this, right? So there is a lot of technical sophistication that gets in the way of doing this kind of stuff in a 3D engine, whereas it's somewhat easier to do in a 2D engine. And of course, also having a dynamic 3D environment means that you don't get to do as much with lighting, right? You can have a lot more amazing lighting effects in a 3D environment if you're baking your light map. But baking a light map requires a static environment. So, many trade-offs.
Here's a question I have, though. You've got people like Todd Howard. You've got people like whoever the guy is over the Larian. I can't remember the guy's name, but they always try to... I'm sorry?
Sven Vink, I think, at Larian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they always try to name drop Ultima. And I don't know if it's like they want people to know about it or if they're just using that to try and appeal to old timers to play their games, because I mean that's kind of where we are at this point, because the reality is that the products they make, yeah, they're kind of like Ultima, but I mean not really. I think the Civil War scene in Skyrim where you sit down and you sort of try to broker peace, that actually felt very serpentile to me. It was very similar to me when you go into the feast hall and you see how everything goes. Of course, it's even more dynamic because you actually have a stake in this, and you have things that you can say in Skyrim to try and change the way things go. So that feels very, to me, very Ultima, very Serpent Isle type. But then at the same time, like you said, even if you use the Open Cities mod, you don't have to load when you go into a city wall, but you're still going to load when you go into the blacksmith shop.
Yep.
So the immersion is broken there. So I guess that would, one thing I wonder about is why do they appeal to the name Ultima, but there are some ways that they're not really, reaching the same place.
To be fair, if you ask the question of what is an Ultima game, you're going to get a very, very wide range of different answers. And depending on where people's entry point to the series was, there's going to be wildly differing answers. For some people, anything that came after Ultima 5 is kind of crap. But, so, I mean, like when Todd Howard or when Sven Vink talk about their love for the Ultima games, I do believe them. I do believe that they actually genuinely did enjoy playing Ultima and have great respect for the series and want to do right by it as they understand it. And I think, I don't know necessarily about Todd Howard and, where he's at with the Ultima games. I think he's maybe more of like an Ultima 4 guy. Sven Vink is definitely an Ultima 7 guy. And it's obvious that he loves Ultima 7 and what it was, technically and story-wise and everything. And I know, I remember during the Divinity Original Sin Kickstarter that he was pitching, that he wanted to have this dynamic world, day-night cycles, NPC schedules, all of this stuff. And there was kind of a sort of palpable heartbreak to the news posts that ultimately were published by Larian saying, we can't make this feature. We can't, it. Maybe you guys with the mod kits can do it, but we can't make it for production. And I know it's harder to do those things in a 3D environment. I mean, Bill Randolph talked about that and why they ultimately had to cut NPC schedules from Ultima 9, right? It's harder to do in a 3D environment. So I get it. And I know some of the other dragons have gotten a little bit more cynical about, Surgon Dragon has gotten quite cynical now, but every time Sven talks about Ultima and Ultima 7 specifically, and he definitely seems to think of it as more of a marketing thing than anything else. But I do think that Sven actually does genuinely love Ultima 7 especially, and wants to do right by it, but it's just, the technical hurdles to get to an Ultima 7-like experience in a top-down 3D engine of the sort that the Divinity Original Sin games are based on is daunting.
Well, if you remember, U7 was also very, very. You're right. Recreating it in a 3D engine is going to be very complicated because it was one of the more simulationist Ultimas I've seen. Taking harvesting wheat, making flour, turning that into bread. Taking a sword blank, turning that into a sword. There was multiple
Yep.
steps and there was work involved. You had the NPC schedules. You had jobs you could do for money.
You could. But yeah, like it's just, and again, like, like we just mentioned, like to do all of that stuff. I mean, and some of that stuff you can code. Like, being able to do a job for money for a person, okay, you can code that in a 3D engine because that's mostly scripting. It's the actual, like, the physical mechanics, right? Of cracking open flour and putting flour on a table and getting water out of a well in a bucket and dumping the bucket on the flour and making bread and then moving the bread onto the oven and waiting, right? For the minute or so that it would take for that thing to turn into a loaf of bread, and then collecting the loaf of bread and then going back to the merchant and selling it to him. It's all of those, and making sure that, nowadays, most games would shortcut it by just showing you a crafting interface. Minecraft does that, right? You want to bake a cake in Minecraft, you just open up the crafting interface and it's, flour, sugar, an egg, and away you go.
Yeah. But at least Minecraft lets you work on cultivating and harvesting the wheat.
That's true too. The world sim is there to a degree. But, to actually depict, not just a crafting interface where it's like, okay, I drag this item into this item into this box, and away I go. Actually depicting, the flour on the table, one object on top of another object in a 3D environment.
Hello.
Hey, Drax.
Greetings.
It is much more difficult. Especially if you want to, especially again when it comes to things like lighting effects, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Halo 5, not Halo 5, Halo Infinite. We just saw this with Halo Infinite, right? Because Bungie wanted to have, a really, really, really dynamic lighting engine for Halo Infinite. But of course, what that means, I mean, on the one hand, you can see why, right? Because now every object in the environment, is being acted upon by the lights that are lighting the environment all the time, right? Casting real-time shadow, like all of this stuff. They were really trying to like just drive up the way that light interacted dynamically in real time with everything in the engine. Really, really cool. Really, really great for things like World Sim, right? Really, really adds to the immersion. But you don't get to use some of the nicer lighting effects that, are available to you when you're baking it into a scene. And they showed that demo at, I want to say E3, but I'm probably wrong. And people weren't so happy with it. They didn't like how it looked because it didn't look as advanced, it didn't look as pretty as some other games that were not using as dynamic of lighting as that. So, trade-offs.
It's a sort of how should we call it? Sort of a regression, or how do you call it when you find or you start using a new technology and everything is just not as good as what was as what is currently available with other different technologies in
Yep.
terms of the general appeal and acceptance.
That's exactly it.
I played an old game the other night called Revenant, and I don't know if anybody here has played that before, but it's very like
I did.
it feels very Ultima 8, but also you have 3D NPCs. And I can remember someone suggesting that years ago, might have even been on Usenet, and said this is what Ultima 9 should have been like. And maybe they had a point in the sense that that would have cut down on a lot of the problems, I would think, because then you basically have the functionality of Ultima 8, and the only 3D elements would have been the NPCs and the player character. And obviously, there were connections within EA to make that happen with The Sims, although The Sims came out after Ultima 9, right? Or was it around the same time?
I'd have to look here. The first Sims came out in... thanks, autocomplete. You're really kicking my ass here. Sims was released Feb 4, 2000, so it would have been worked on alongside Ultima 9, but it came out a bit later.
Okay. So see that, and looking at the old proto Ultima 9 screenshots, you can tell. You can look at the land itself, and it looks like Ultima Online, like the grass and the hills and stuff. I mean, except Ultima Online kept that 3D aspect of it static.
Well, funny thing, one of the UO2 proposals wanted to use the Sims engine.
I mean, why not? You've got the isometric look to it, which I know that's not like preferable to a lot of people, and that would cut out a lot of the features that you like about it, Kenneth. But it might have ended up with more of a stable game because of it. I don't know for sure, but
maybe
he does.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, like I look at the old ISO U9 screenshots, and in a way, yeah, I can see, that was like, it was cool what they were trying to do, but I'm really glad they moved away from it because it had been done before, right?
That's true.
And, I'm glad they went to hardware accelerated graphics. I don't think the game would have looked as good or run as well with software rendering. And I'm glad they moved the camera down because that let you experience Britannia in a way that you hadn't before, right? Even with, sure, again, like bracketing out the technical issues or any other nitpick you could levy at Ultima 9, just the experience of being able to see Britannia from the ground level. You'd never had that before, really. I mean, technically, I guess, with the Underworld games, but those were always inside, You never get to walk around outside in Britannia and really experience it from that ground level view, Look around and look up into the trees and look up into the sky and see the moons overhead changing phase. You'd never had that before. So I'm really, really glad that they did ultimately make the choice to go ahead and do it that way. Even if, I mean, even granted that, the constant story rewrites, engine tweaking, all of that stuff were in many ways detrimental to the project. That is one thing I am glad they did and kept. But, I remember somewhere I saw, I don't know if it was like a cobbled together thing. I found like some little video somewhere. I'll see if I can figure out where I saw this, but there was some little cobbled together video that was like, a bunch of fantasy people. Nowadays, I suppose you'd compare it to like The Sims Medieval, but it was a UO2 pitch using the Sims engine tech. Could have worked. But then, EA had kind of got cold feet about putting out a UO2 because, of course, UO was still such a moneymaker for them, and they didn't want to, detract from that. And they were kind of too scared to move forward with any kind of sequel that was getting pitched at the time. And there were a few different iterations of the UO2 idea that got pitched around.
Well, I one of the reasons I do like Neverwinter Nights is you do get that overhead viewpoint that is sort of Ultima 7. But again, the interaction, of course, is not there at all. Basically, it is more or less an Infinity Engine game, which is funny because like I just trashed the Infinity Engine, but this at least does not feel as flat as an Infinity Engine game does. So
yeah, not quite as flat. One thing that I will, that was the other thing that I wanted to mention. The game that I played, when did this one come out? I got to look this one up now. But the game that I played, and I remember thinking, if they had built Ultima 9 with this, it would have been okay, was Twinson's Odyssey. And Twinson's Odyssey actually came out in 1997.
Wasn't that one of those ones on the Sierra, like Imagination Network or something?
No, Twin Suns Odyssey was shoot, who made Twin Suns Odyssey? Twin Suns Odyssey, actually, it was published by EA. It was developed by Adeline Software International. But I mean, to be fair, I'll grab a couple of images here, and I'll drop them in chat, because you gotta. So, like the Twin Suns Odyssey Overworld was in 3D. It was kind of, it's not cell shaded, but like it's not everything was necessarily textured, right? It was just using flat color objects, but still, I liked. It was kind of like it was kind of cool, just like how you could wander around the world, and you had a fair bit of like the camera was not purely freeform, but
Not sure why, but looking at that, I think of old school Myst.
yeah, kind of. There's some elements there. It was like it was a third person game, so like you can kind of see your character. Where's your character in that shot? That's kind of a bad shot. Hang on, I think I have another one here. Here we go. Here's a better shot. So you can kind of see your character, right? So and you would use mouse and key, you'd use the mouse to move yourself around, and the camera was semi-static, but it would periodically like reorient, and as you moved around the world, it would kind of just always keep you in frame. But it wouldn't like do that in a smooth, continuous motion. It would kind of like you'd move, and then it would reorient, and then you'd move around in the new view and keep going. The problem was that was only the overworld. The interiors were isometric. And so you're moving around an isometric environment instead.
So a multi-scale, okay.
Yeah, it was a dual scale thing, sort of. But I mean, like, interesting game. I don't know if didn't have the, in keeping with the finest Ultima tradition, it didn't have the best combat engine. But it was. I think it was I actually think it's a French game. I think Adeline Software was based in France. But I don't know. I remember playing it a couple of times. It's actually a really tricky game to finish. But like I remember at the time thinking, like this would have been all right. And like, oh, here's a couple more screenshots, because like this shows you again this gives you another example of like here you can see more terrain, and you're inside like I think this is like a spaceport area, but you can see like the camera's pitched down a little bit more. So it was interesting. And not a pure open world, but like fairly large outdoor environments. And then, you'd have to transition. You were transitioning between planets a lot of the time. So, at least there was sort of a baked in excuse for, okay, well now we actually have to load a new area. But anyways, that was one game. At the time I played it, I thought, this would have been an all right engine for U9. But I don't hold that view anymore, although it is still an interesting game.
Yeah, I'm really having to like stretch my thinking looking at these screenshots. Like, of course, I mean, most of that really comes down to the art style. So, I mean, a lot of that could be circumvented, but
yeah. So, yeah.
I think I told you one time, Kenneth, about a dream I had. This was like really odd, but like I had a dream once that I got my hands on Proto Ultima 9, and the dream version of Proto Ultima 9 was like the perfect Ultima.
Yeah.
It's like even the alpha, but it was voxels. It was like this massive voxel world, and all the characters were like really tiny, but it felt neat to play in the dream. But yeah, then I woke up and I was like, well, that was kind of cool.
Yeah, voxels were kind of all the rage at that time too, weren't they?
Yeah, they really were. I mean, I actually just found the other day, I found on GOG Hexplore, and there's one other one, Darkstone. Darkstone was voxel as well.
One Tiberian Sun came out around the same time, and that was a voxel-based engine.
Well, there was another voxel-based game I played the crap out of back in the day, and that was Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri.
Oh, that's right. Alpha Centauri was good fun. Like, that was really good fun.
Beyond Earth was a nice attempt, but it really didn't achieve the same feel.
A fair point. Yeah,
But-
Anyway, sorry, you were going to say something, Clorthos. Go right ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I did mention in the chat about Outward.
Yes,
I've
the
enjoyed
actual
that pretty
topic.
well. Yeah, and actually, I just died in a bunch of prisoners killed me in Neverwinter Nights, so I'm just done with that.
You know, seeing that name, I have to wonder if you're a fan of Ghostbusters.
Oh, yes, yeah. So Clorthos is my dragon name that I thought of like when I was like 11, 10 or 11, 12 maybe, and I don't think it was even conscious, but yeah, Vince Clortho was probably influential on that subconsciously, and so I was like, oh, Clorthos, and I was Clorthos Dragon, and I'm going to make a name that is notoriously hard to type or busy to type at the very least.
Yeah, you got to think about that one a little bit. You can't just accidentally stumble into it.
Yeah. Well, and then like more recently, Rothbard comes from probably my interest in Austrian economics. Murray Rothbard, very, very, very good author on the subject. But yeah, we don't have to talk about that.
Yeah, this is not an economics podcast, I don't think.
No.
I mean, we
No.
sometimes verge, but no, you had actually pitched Outward as like an idea for the topic, and I guess just to maybe set the stage for those unaware of what it is. So it's an open-ish world RPG, but the conceit is that you are kind of just like a normal dude or dudette as you play the game. I think you can gender select, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah. You can create your character however you want, and part of the game, from what I understand, is there's a bloodline aspect to it. So eventually, your character gets to the point where they age out, and as you keep playing the game, you're playing your son, and then later on your grandson. I haven't nearly gotten that far yet. So
you could play Ponzi the 27th, like the ancestor or to the descendant of the great legacy of economists. Then,
yeah. Very, very likely. But yeah, I've kind of been enjoying it. I should say as well, like I'm still just sort of getting my feet wet with the game. I've played probably, I would say maybe 3 or 4 hours, 5 hours tops, and I'm just now got to another town. So yeah, there are zones in the overworld map, and part of the thing too is that it sort of encapsulates more or less the idea that Richard Garriott was talking about with Shroud. So, competent single player that can fade in or out with multiplayer. And the neat thing about Outward too is it has local co-op, so you could actually have a couple of friends with controllers, and you both are in the same place, and you can play through the story together. So that part of it is really cool. I just fired it up. It's in the Unreal Engine, I believe, and so it's got that Unreal Engine 4 look to it and that feel.
It's
which
not a
is
bad
not
look.
bad. No. You have a backpack. I've got a backpack on right now, and I can hit B to unequip it. And unequipping your backpack makes you more maneuverable in combat. You put it back on, it makes it slower to dodge and to, not necessarily to hit, but it makes you a slower, easier target.
consider how many RPG protagonists carry hundreds of pounds of crap.
Well, and that's kind of another thing I think that is sort of one of the game's conceits is that, like, I mean, I don't know if I'd necessarily call it like a hardcore game, but, it is a little bit more survival focused, right? So you do have to kind of, as you're exploring the land, there is a survival element to the game, which includes, your gear impacting your, your abilities. Just looking at the Steam page here, it also talks about, like, it mentions the solo or cooperative play. It mentions that spellcasting is fairly ritualized. It also mentions that the game is pretty much constantly auto-saving. It's like got the Microsoft Word save system. Just to say that...
Yeah, there's no quick save at all. You're
it's
playing, and when you quit, you quit. And it
Yep.
saves it for you at that point.
Yep.
Or saves along the way, whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty much... It sounds like... Well, the phrasing here is thus. Constant auto-saving means you must live with your decisions. So there's no going back. It's basically like an MMO system, right? Like, what is an MMO save system? It's basically just you're moving forward. You're just always moving forward, and every decision you make in an MMO, you can't revert that.
Yeah, there's no save scumming at all. The other aspect of this is, again, it's one of those things where it is not typical. You don't come out of the barrel being able to shoot fire from your hands. In fact, from what I've read and what I've seen is you actually have to go through a good bit of stuff to actually get to where you can use magic in the game.
Fair enough.
So there's that aspect to it as well. And I get the comparisons to Dark Souls, but I'm not like I enjoy playing this more than I enjoyed playing Dark Souls. Because I guess just because you still do have more of the trappings of the traditional RPG.
And it's not like that hardcore, right?
No, not really. I was very intimidated to go into the first dungeon area. And in fact, what I will do when I'm traveling between towns, I actually try to avoid bandits when I can. If I see someone up ahead, I will move around to the side and do my best to avoid them, which again, if you're talking from a realistic perspective and what I would do, yeah.
That's kind of how you go about it, yeah.
Yeah. And so, I don't know, it may not appeal to everybody, but I think I had seen it on a few different forums and places mentioned that people were moving sort of to this from Shroud of the Avatar. And I can see why. Like, to me, this feels more like what was promised back in 2013, 2014. Because it hits a lot of those same things that were supposedly promised. I think the big things that are lacking are some of the conversations. It's just a dialogue tree. There's really not a whole lot to it generally. And crafting and all that is all menu based, which really it's kind of the same thing with Shroud too now, isn't it? They tried the Gumps, and then when they realized that was going to take some work, they gave that up.
Well, I mean, to be fair, okay, just to briefly or perhaps potentially at length dive down the rabbit hole, but can we just talk about the Gumps for a minute? Because I realize that, a lot of Ultima fans have a great
adoration.
Yeah, adoration or admiration for the Gumps. And it's a cool idea. And to be fair, again, I think they did that well with U9. Like, I think the Gumps in U9 are all right because they tamed them, right? The Gumps in U9, there's a bag Gump, pop up, and there it is. There's a backpack Gump, there it is.
But some were even unhappy with the fact that it was a grid instead of
just the fact that they items. Put the grid in, and that's where people were upset with. But that's what I like about it, is the fact that they constrain it. Because, if you think about okay, to be fair, as involved with scouting as I am well acquainted with the experience of backpacking into an area and then having to rummage around inside the thing that I've been hauling around for the last 5 hours to find the one thing which happens to be somewhere near the bottom, and crap. I could have packed this better. U7, the backpack in U7 certainly offers you that experience, but it's not necessarily the experience you want, And I tried the Gump-based version of Shroud of the Avatar, and it was U7 on steroids, and not in any kind of good way, It was.
I mean, I would agree. It was not well implemented. Part of what I would say though is, if you, again, money and time, right? I think you could modernize that. Now, the end result would probably look something like a mini game, like I've imagined like it comes up as a floating gump, and you have the option to actually zoom in within the window of your backpack to like look farther down in there and look for what you're kind of rummage through. I think you could do that in a good way. Plus, you would need some way
Layers.
to quickly go ahead.
Layers. Or like
Yeah,
pockets
yeah.
on the backpack, you know?
Yeah. Something to divvy it out where you could organize it that way. And then this is actually something I think that Ultima 7, like if you could code this into Ultima 7 somehow, it would be useful to sort of drag a lasso around multiple items that you want to select at once to move around. Something like that could be pretty useful.
Well, that's good. You should pitch that to the Exalt team.
Yeah. Because they're, they have
so much time for that now.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Actually, you should pitch it to the Scum VM guys. That's who you need to pitch it to.
Oh, yeah.
Since Exalt's part of Scum VM now, right?
They've had all the Ultima stuff just laid at their doorstep.
Yeah,
which
they
is
just
interesting.
hoovered
I
up
did
all the
fire up
Ultima
Ultima
engines.
6. Yeah. I wonder if they're actually gonna. I don't know. Maybe you should like interview one of those guys at some point. See if they're actually, if this is something that they're interested in. That's what really I've thought about is like, are these guys really? Because I mean, when I'm thinking Scum VM, I'm thinking these are guys that are primarily LucasArts fans, point and click adventure fans. I just can't see them having a ton of interest in the Ultima games, but maybe I'm wrong. Because I mean, I like those games as well. So,
well, that's where it started as, but Scum VM has really become like the Omni tool or the Swiss Army knife of getting old games to run. So yeah, it started out as like the LucasArts and Sierra thing for those games, but since then, like I mean, they've expanded to I don't even remember, they support like just a truly mind-boggling library of games now. So and it's kind of funny because like Scum VM is a huge community project, right? Like bigger than any of the Ultima fan engines for sure. It's a huge community project. And so there's all these different people who are contributing to their little module within the code base, right? So there's the guy who's doing the pentagram stuff, and there's the guy who's doing, adding support, adding better support for the LucasArts stuff. And it's just kind of, all these different people are contributing, but they're only contributing to like a little piece, one little module. But in the aggregate, you're left with this amazing product that can run just about any old game you'd want to run with it. So.
Yeah, it's a very fascinating tool, I would say. I mean, I don't really know how it actually all works. I mean, is it all more or less running under the same code, or is Scum VM sort of like an envelope, sort of like Steam, to run different engines?
Kind of like it. I think the Scum VM application now, is really just like it's like a framework, and then it's got different modules within it. So depending on which game you're running, it's going to load up you're trying to run Ultima 8, here's the pentagram module. Oh, you're trying to run Maniac Mansion, here's the here's the Scum module, right? And it just, sort of I think a lot of that is fairly transparent to the user, as it should be, right? But it's basically just, if it supports a game, if you're trying to run a game that it knows it has support for, then it'll just light it up in that engine and away you go.
And I'll say this, the older I get, the more useful something becomes if I can simply load it up and it starts and it works. I didn't used to be that way.
Right.
I would be totally fine with spending a Friday night, tinkering, getting Ultima 7 to run, when I was a teenager.
Floppies for Ultima 7.
Yeah, nice.
So, I mean, but that part, I don't know. I just don't, we don't have the time we used to.
No, we've gotten old and busy and employed, and some of us are parents and all of that stuff.
We're just plain tired.
Or that. Yeah, who has the time anymore to, dick around with? I mean, I'm just so glad that, as much as I loved, hacking together yet another autoexec.bat and config.sys combo, I'm really glad I don't have to do that anymore.
Wasn't that the old joke that a young man has all the time and all the energy, but none of the money to get things done? That a middle-aged man has all of the money and all of the energy to get things done, but none of the time. And an old man has all of the money and all of the time, but none of the energy.
Yeah, pretty much. Pick two.
Yeah, I just wonder. Like my grandma had some pretty insane arthritis, and I'm exhibiting some signs of that right now. Not a whole lot, but some. So I'm wondering, because the reality is there are going to be nursing homes in the 2050s and the 2060s that will be full of old people playing video games 24/7. If the world still exists at that time. But then what happens when your arthritis kicks in and you can't hold a controller?
Well, hopefully by 2040 or 2050, we'll have some sort of touchless control system.
Elon Musk will be successful in his mind control.
Yeah, or like
mind
some kind of
controller tech,
or some kind of like heavily gesture-based VR rig. I don't know.
and then like games will start coming out for that, and we'll all say these aren't real games.
Well, right.
I still feel that way about mobile games. Like I just can't bring myself to spend a ton of time and certainly no amount of money on those things. I mean, the closest you get to is like, Doom 2 being on Android. I mean, that's, and it's very playable and it feels like Doom.
Every generation, or my generation, I mean 2 or 3 years at this point, sees the games that come after them as hopelessly casual and too easy and too mainstream, and the ones behind them being too punishingly challenging and difficult.
Oh my gosh, I just about choked on my coffee when I was reading a review of like the re-release of Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning. So re-reckoning, right?
Did they make it to where magic doesn't suck and the ranged combat was viable?
Well, they didn't really overhaul the mechanics, right? Like it was mainly just an aesthetic overhaul.
Yeah, it feels exactly the same. When I've played it, which is not bad.
But the thing that I laughed at in the review was like, it was talking about how like, so it is a 2012 game, right? It doesn't really hold your hand. And I'm just
What?
like, I'm sorry, what? Just about did a spit take, right? Because I'm like, but that's literally exactly what you're talking about, right? Is that, you have, but from the other side, right? You have someone who, and I mean, probably, someone who's still quite young, right? Like even if the person writing that review was, say, 23, right? Well, they were in their mid-teen, they were like mid-teens when Reckoning first came out.
Oh boy.
Right? And so, their impression of what constitutes a game that does not particularly hold your hand as a young adult gamer is vastly different than, our interpretation of that same concept, thinking back to when we were young adult gamers, which, admittedly in some of our cases might be 20 years ago.
Don't remind me.
But just like, I had a good laugh at that one because it's like, oh, well, I guess we've hit the point where Reckoning was not holding your hand. Okay.
They need to try the old arcade games. For example, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. If you stay without moving for a few seconds, the game drops a bomb on you and kills you instantly.
Well, if you idle for 3 minutes in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, he'll get tired of waiting on you to do inputs and just walk off screen. All the while staring at his clock and then looking at the fourth wall.
I liked Commander Keen 4 for that one, right? Because he would just sit down and read a book, and then periodically he would like look up and glare at you. Good stuff,
and
right? Gotta have fun with the player.
There's an animation also on Commander Keen where I think he starts peeing.
I don't know about that one.
Animation is used at all, but it's there. I looked at the data files.
I don't know if they would have slipped that one out. I think he looks at his watch maybe at one point, but then he just sits down and starts reading, and then glares at you, and then goes back to reading.
There's a cheat code that allows you to see the graphics data from within the game, and there's a specific level where that graphical data is loaded. You cannot see it on just any level.
Okay. Well, then who knows? Maybe I've tripped across it in the past because Commander Keen is another one of those games that I've kind of, pretty much explored to the maximum extent possible. It's passed it multiple times, used every cheat function. Yeah. It's a fun
So
one.
would you say Commander Keen is probably I never played those games. I just never came across that. Would there be any value in searching that out, or is it more like if you played it at that time, it's a nostalgic thing and you still enjoy it today, that sort of thing?
Well, you know what? My kids enjoy playing Commander Keen, right?
Okay.
I still
So
enjoy it.
it's the thing about Commander Keen is it was not the first platformer made for PC, but it was the first competent platformer that, very sort of that could kind of stand on its own against console platformers. That's a bit of a bold
So
claim, but
more or less
Actually,
like the Super Mario for DOS.
in a way, yeah, like it,
yeah.
yeah, in a way, because
There was a port of Mega Man back then, at the same
Oh God.
year, and Commander Keen was leagues forward compared to that. What's
Mhm.
it was well the that port of Mega Man, it was just not good at all, and it more than the port, I think it was sort of a licensed game. The Mega Man game, and Commander Keen and the other was Duke Nukem were the games that competed against it at that time, and they were way ahead in terms of graphics, technology, control, and action in general.
yeah, like it's a really, if you like platformer games, it's well worth checking out because they did a darn fine job of just creating a platformer for the PC, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
the first three games of Commander Keen, they're very simple yet very good.
Yep.
And Commander Keen, the second trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, are way better. And there's a middle game. It's Commander Keen Dreams, I think,
Oh, Keen
which
Dreams.
yeah, it's a sort of a middle ground between the two. Some people call it 3.5.
Yeah, because it was a tech demo for it's basically a tech demo for what became the Keen 4 engine. It's not quite as advanced,
Yeah.
but it's also it's it's kind of like the Mario 2 of the Keens, like the North American Mario 2, right? Because you know how Mario 2
Yeah.
like in North America is really weird, like it's just kind of its own
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, Keen Dreams is that, right? Like you can see where they're going, right?
Yeah.
Especially once you play Keen 4, you can totally see, oh yeah, that's where they were going with that. But it's
But
just weird. And there's vegetables. There's lots of vegetables.
different gameplay, different weapons, and it doesn't feel exactly like the first Keen game. It doesn't feel like the fourth game. It's a sort of a spin-off in terms of gameplay,
Yep.
because the fourth follows more along the line of the third and previous ones. This one was sort of had a sort of a little different gameplay, and that's what makes it weird.
Yeah, a little bit. I will say this, just word to the wise. Personally, in my experience, Commander Keen 3 is the most punishingly hard of all of them. It is just, it starts off well enough, but there are some levels in that game that are just nightmarish to get through. Like it is, again, if you like platformers, it is worth checking out. Because it is a truly, it was truly the first really competent, well done PC platformer. And, it's enjoyable on its face. There's in a way, like you say, the first 1, 2, 3, they're fairly simple, but there is some depth there. There's some stuff to be found if you go looking for it. And then, Keen 4, 5, and 6, very different breed of game, but also just, intensely fun. But yeah, there's And in all of them, Keen 1's pretty easy. Keen 2 has some spots that are difficult to get through, but, and like, well, actually, Keen 2, 4, 5, and 6 all, broadly speaking, fall into that mold. There's parts that are hard to get through. But there's also parts that are, really quite easy to navigate. Keen 3, though, is just there's maybe a quarter of the game is really easy, and the rest of it is just a nightmare slog through one hellish level after another. But
I remember
whatever.
used to play together with my younger brother, and I remember we had a turn each, uh, some levels, and I remember I have memories of both of us screaming when the Vorticon approached us.
Ah, the ninjas, man.
And running back and
It was the ninjas, man. It was those Vorticon ninjas. Oh my gosh, those things. Like you
yeah,
could, if there was two of them on the screen, you're just like, I'm dead. I'm dead.
yeah.
I get up now, just kill me.
Remember the first time we killed one, we also screamed because we did not
Yeah.
expect it to die because we gave them a couple shots and
Yeah, they take like
nothing
4
seemed
hits.
to happen. and,
Ah.
finally one day we killed one and
Oh, yeah. No, I totally, right? And of course, in Keen 3, there's like that one level, and it's important too. Like, there's some important thing you have to collect at the end, and it's just like an entire base full of these things. You're just like, oh my gosh. Yeah, no, Keen 3 is hard. I guess we should be careful talking about the Keen games because we've been saying Keen 6 a few times, and that one never got published, I don't think. There was Keen 4, Secret of the Oracle, and then there was Keen 5, The Armageddon Machine. But then I don't think there was a sixth one that followed it.
yeah, there was a demo and then the release.
Did they ever actually release? Well, there was. Did they?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I mean, I know they were trying to like reboot it in 2001, but shoot, now I gotta look this up.
There are long plays on YouTube.
Commander Keen 6. Hang on, I gotta search this up.
Aliens ate my babysitter.
Oh,
Yep,
of course.
Long play video.
That's why. Oh, right. I remember that one. Okay. Yes. Thank you. No, you're right. Yes. Totally forgot about that. I was in my mind, I was connecting it to 4 and 5 because they're like 1, 2, and 3 is one story, 4 and 5 is another story, and then 6 is its own thing. Right.
Yeah. Maybe you missed that for the a platformer I was very fond of back then. There were only 2 games. There was supposed to be a third one, and it was never released, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's been there's been a few attempts to sort of bring like they even announced like a mobile thing back in like 2019. And literally, that was Bethesda, E3 2019. They like did this big Commander Keen tease, and it was supposed to like star, I think, Keen's kids, like his twins, son and daughter. Right? He's all grown up and he has twins, and their names are like Billy and Billy, with a Y and an IE, girl and boy. And supposedly that was going to be released summer 2019, but literally, like it was mentioned at E3 and then nothing.
I was talking about the Captain Comic.
I played that. Oh my gosh. I remember Captain Comic.
Yeah, there was Captain Comic 1 and 2, and the third one was never released.
Now, to be fair, Captain Comic wasn't that good.
No, but it was one of the first, I think it was the first PC platformer I played.
Yeah, I think you might be right. It was certainly one of the earliest. And, I mean, like, it's passable, but it's, Captain Comic is useful for the same reason that, like, honestly, in my ongoing quest to get my kids to like Star Wars, I've lately started thinking, is there like just some tame 1975, 1976 sci-fi that's not like too awful or too graphic or too whatever? There's just some tamer 1975, 1976 sci-fi that I can like subject my kids to and then introduce them to Star Wars so they can see just how of a night and day thing that was. And Captain Comic is useful in the same way. You can play Captain Comic. You can even enjoy Captain Comic. I did. But then you play Commander Keen and you're just like, oh, I get it.
I was about to suggest Battlestar Galactica, but I like the old Battlestar Galactica. So
yeah, and you know what? Unfortunately, BSG is like,
oh, not almost the new one. No, sir.
I like the new one too. The new one is like, I mean, it's a hard watch.
I don't hate the new one, but it's
not campy. It's not campy.
Well, it's not for kids. Yeah.
No.
That's what I like about the old one. It is very campy, and I enjoy that about it.
Yeah. Although, to be fair, the opening episode, there's some stuff in there that I don't know. I don't think my kids would do well with. But,
okay.
It's
been a while.
It's been a while. But yeah, like maybe that one. But like that one, even then that one is, decent quality. I don't know. I just got to find like a couple of movies that are just like, wow, that's so terrible. Like I can almost see the strings. And then show them Star Wars and be just like, oh, now we get it. But yeah, Captain Comic to Commander Keen is very that. You can play Captain Comic and it's all right, but then you play Commander Keen and you're like, yep, okay, got it.
I may try Commander Keen at some point in the future, but all during...
There's a package on Steam. You can just pick it up for cheap.
Yeah, I may do that at some point. While you guys were talking about that, I died on the field. Not really died, but I got killed by some bandits. And so this is a very Ultima death, right? So I supposedly, quote unquote, died. And I wake up in this dark cave, and this large, tall, monstrous looking ancient thing apparently saved my life. And it also likes reading books. It's called an Immaculate. So I was like, well, that's kind of Ultima-ish. You don't really die. You just get taken somewhere. And you still have all your equipment. So again, the whole thing of like, oh, it's so hard. I mean, that's kind of why I felt like the Ultimas were not too punishing, because at the very least, you may lose some XP. There may have been something I lost in the middle of all that, but yeah, I'm out of this cave and back on my way.
Oh heck, I'm looking at Outward now on Steam, and it's on sale right now. It's like Deep Silver Weekend on Steam.
I mean, it's I wouldn't say it's like brilliant per se, but like I kind of said, to me it scratches some of those Shroud of the Avatar itches. It's like, I mean, every time I've booted up Shroud of the Avatar in the past few years, it's like mountains of disappointment. So, which is not even really. I mean, again, the point I make too is like, I didn't even really spend a whole lot of money on this thing. Like, I really feel bad for the people that dropped a bunch on this. And, it's like, wow. But Outward, relatively small team. Now I should say there's not really a lot of item interaction in the world.
Well, it is an Unreal Engine game, and
yeah, very static, I would say. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, I mean, I've not delved into the development side too much, but yeah, most UE games tend to be static, right? Because that's just what it supports.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Captain Comic interface. Thanks, Drax. Right. But that's, I mean, to say that it's a 3D RPG, which has a fairly static world, like unfortunately that just kind of is what it is these days. There's very few that don't. So, okay, you kind of take it and roll with it. It can still offer Ultima and I mean, that goes back to something I said before, right? Like if you ask different people what an Ultima is, they're going to give you different answers. And so you can still have an Ultima-like experience inside a static 3D world. Where you run into problems, this gets back to like the Sven Vink conversation, is when you start calling out specific features that
you're not able to deliver on said features.
And you're not able to deliver on said features, right? If you want to just have Ultima as like a general touchstone, cool, all right, all power to you, and we'll see what you can do with that. If you want to start calling out specifically like, oh yeah, like the NPC schedules and the day-night cycles, and then you deliver a game that's like always day all the time and the shopkeeper never goes home. Okay. You missed that one. Sorry. It's funny coming back to, so Drax has just posted screenshots of Captain Comic and Commander Keen. And do you know what else is funny? There's an Ultima like parallel here too. Do you see it?
I have an alt tabbed over, so I'm not okay. I don't think anything's going to come at me. Give me a second here. Well, other than the castle.
No, not even the castle. Captain Comic though has a gameplay window, and then it has an interface border around it.
Sure.
Commander Keen is full screen, all gameplay.
So you're saying Commander Keen is the same quality as Ultima 7?
I don't know if I'd say it's the same quality as Ultima 7, but it's interesting to, look at these two screenshots side by side and be just like, hey, like that's literally, that is the same sort of interface shift that we saw between Ultima 6 and Ultima 7.
Right.
And around the same time frame too, Captain Comics 1988, Keen is 1990, Keen 4 1991. Now Keen 4 puts some interface elements back on the screen, but not too many, right? Like just a little box up in the corner. Commander Keen 1, 2, and 3, you had to hit the space bar to even see how many shots you had left in your gun.
You may disagree.
That interface is optional. You can disable it in the options menu.
Yes, that's true too.
You may disagree, Kenneth, but I really do think that the full screen interface with Nuvi brings loads to Ultima 6. I mean,
that's the only way I play Nuvi now.
Yeah, it's and it's rejuvenated my attempts. I've never completed Ultima 6. I always got to the point where the interface was just too much in the way, and there wasn't enough nostalgia on my end, or just a whole lot of interest back then to get into that. As long as I had Ultima 7 to conquer.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like, I don't mind the U6 interface. I really don't. But I do like what Nuvi brings to the table. And so, I'm not going to complain. The
drag and drop functionality itself is loads helpful to me because it was very esoteric before.
I guess. I mean, U6 was my introduction, so I kind of very quickly mastered all of its controls. But I mean, if you want to move a powder keg, or if you want to move like a crate or something across the floor, like it is busy work, right? It's just, move, click on the thing and the target, move, click on the thing and the target, move, click on the thing and the target. And it's just, it's busy work, definitely. So Nuvi does allow you to shortcut some of that, and it's good in that regard. And to be fair, Nuvi's gumps are actually kind of okay.
Yeah, no, they look very nice to me. I like the conversation engine.
Oh, the conversation thing in Nuvi is inspired brilliance.
Oh yeah, it's great.
Like the semi-transparent overlay, but it's dithered, in like that old school pixel dither. It's like, oh my god, I don't know who thought of this.
It fits in. It's amazing because it's like you look at it, it's like it's as if like, well, they could have designed it this way.
Yeah, no, that was an inspired thing. Like just, yeah, I don't know if that was Eric who thought that one up, but just the first time I saw a screenshot of that, I'm like, oh, yes, that is how you do that.
So I'm back to the starting town, Scherzo, and
in Outward.
I have to pay 150 silver to clear my family name. There's some sort of blood offense that my family has made, and so we're trying to make that back to the town. I don't remember exactly what the story was, but now I'm just trying to find the lady I'm supposed to give the 150 to, because after my travels, I've got some riches, so I can pay off my family name and get to keep the house that I have in town, which looks like a dilapidated old lighthouse for some reason. So yeah, that's basically how it starts.
Paging Golem Dragon. Oh yeah, you probably haven't heard that, but Golem Dragon is ludicrously proud of maintaining what town? I think it's in the town of Yannaford in Shroud of the Avatar, but Golem Dragon's residence, and it's literally like, I don't even know why Portalarium put a waterfront lot there, because it's literally like just this little puddle in the middle of town. Like, I don't even know if you could call it a lake. It may be a pond.
That makes about as much sense as the rest of the game, though. So.
But Golem Dragon has put up a lighthouse.
Oh, beautiful.
Just right there in this puddle in the middle of Yannaford. And apparently several of the neighbors have complained about it because the lighthouse casts light, eh? It does. Shine its light. But yeah. So if you have a dilapidated lighthouse in Outward, that's good. I like that. We have a running gag on this podcast for that.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I have no idea. Let me look at that. One other thing about the map, which this makes it a little more challenging even than Ultima, although maybe I haven't found a sextant yet. Maybe that's still in this game, but you have the maps, but you can't tell where you are. So you sort of have to use the context clues and the landscape to kind of figure out where you are. It still works. It's not annoying. So, maybe you could say that's Ultima-like, but I don't know. I'm just tossing different things. I'm not an expert at this game. I just, thought it might be interesting to talk about in terms of, another thing with the design philosophy, you can see this from the screenshots, that it does have almost, it's not really just a steampunk thing, though. It sort of has an oriental vibe to it as well. It's got a very unique look to it, which I really like.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call that Oriental, but yeah, like it's got a thing. It definitely has a sort of particular aesthetic to it. But that's good though, right?
Like at least it's trying to be a little different, and that's okay.
Yeah, well, like here's a desert screenshot. This seems a little bit more sort of classically like Ottoman, maybe, right? You got like you got some domed buildings, and there's some onions over there, and honking big scimitar on the one guy. So that's cool though.
I don't know if it's worth I can't remember how much I paid for it, but I would say it's worth like $5, $10,
Well, I can grab it for 17 right now, but
oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think
whatever.
That's terrible, but it's up to you, my friend. Oh no, she says, Stephen, I'm afraid you came too late. The lighthouse has been sold and is used by the guards as a barrack.
Oh, dude, you lost your house.
Come on, I worked like a dog to earn that money. Anyway.
Tragedy.
Wow. Okay.
Clortos Dragon is now homeless.
I'm just kind of skipping through the dialogue right here.
Yeah, for sure. Keen Dreams. I gotta play that again.
A blood price. Okay, yeah. So it was a blood price that I had to pay. And apparently I had to pay it within 5 days, but I think it's only been like 3 days.
Unless it takes a while to come back from the dead.
Yes, that could be it. And also, like, I did take some time sort of back and forth. I felt like it was only like 3 days, but and the game just basically took that away from me. There's no option I can tell to be able to pay that back. But I guess the plus is I've got 140 silver still, so whatever. But having a house is not a necessity in these games anyway, usually. I do think that in Reckoning, I think re-Reckoning, I was glad I finally got to that forest area with the spiders. I was able to do that little quest and get that house. Because inventory is a pretty big issue in that game. Where do you put all the stuff? You file it under junk and you sell what you can, and
I don't know. I can't think of the last game that I actually really became like an inventory pack rat in. Honestly, the only game I have any trouble now managing my inventory in is Pokemon Go, because I play it so damn infrequently that I never seem to use up all of the Pokeballs that it gives me every week. So, currently my inventory is something like 1,200 out of a capacity, and my inventory capacity is like 800 items. So, I can't use the store or the shop or anything. And I'd literally have to like go for like a 6-hour walk and just grind out my entire battery life and every Pokemon I could catch. And maybe then I'd have inventory space. But every other game, I don't know. Like, I just don't hold on to stuff. I'll keep my one set of armor and my current weapon set. And like the only time in Reckoning that I would hold on to like an extra piece of armor is if I was working on a set. And it's not always worth it to work on a set in Reckoning. Like, there's a handful of sets that are tied to specific quest lines. Those are worth going for. Everything else is basically you don't want to do it.
Well,
Because it's literally like it depends entirely on just like random drops in the game world. And it's like, I don't really feel like dealing with that. Oh, I see Drax has dug up the Commander Keen sprite files. Not only is he turning around and peeing on the wall, he's also mooning the camera.
I've always sort of been a pack rat in a sense with RPGs because my thought is, well, I can sell it, make money.
Yeah, I mean, like if I pick up extra stuff in Reckoning, I just junk it and sell it as soon as I can. But
Yeah, that's yeah, because I've already. I mean, it's very easy to make some money in that game. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I think 4 hours in, I already had like 12,000 gold.
Yep. It's, yeah. That game is not hard to power up in. It really isn't. But like, and I don't mind that, right? Like, I mean, my first Ultima is Ultima 6. You don't ever need to level up to pass Ultima 6. Everything you need to pass Ultima 6, you have at the start. The only, almost, you need the Unlock Magic spell and you need the Telekinesis spell. Unlock Magic is level 3. You start at level 3. Telekinesis is level 2, so you can already cast it. You just have to find somebody and buy it from them. You can level up and you get the more powerful spells and you get more hit points and all of that stuff. And sure, if you want to slog through Hithloth a bunch of times, then that is advantageous. If you want to charge into Destard without benefit of invisibility rigs, then hit points and really powerful spells are advantageous. But you can pass Ultima 6 without ever leveling up once. And I like that the game sort of accommodates doing it either way. And Reckoning very much falls into that same mold, Reckoning, you don't have a choice. You just level up as you go. Most games these days tend to do that. They don't require you to do some sort of ritualistic thing to actually gain a level, like meditating at a shrine. But, like Reckoning, there's not really, if you want to seek out challenge in Reckoning, it's there for you. But, the game, there's no point in the game that's going to be so punishingly, cruelly difficult that you're not going to be able to work your way through it. It doesn't really, the developers want you to actually experience the breadth of the world and the entirety of the story. And they're not really going to put too many obstacles in your way beyond what is reasonable for the sake of quests, as you go about trying to do that. And I like that, I don't mind it sometimes when games are harder and more challenging, but sometimes it's just nice to, I just want to take the damn game in and not have to, repeat this section 30 times in order to do so.
I can understand that. I just realized I just happened to look at the character sheet portion of the game. I don't see any listing for experience or leveling up in this at all. So I wonder if there is any kind of leveling up in this. There's got to be some sort of improvement that you go through, but I don't see any, you'll get to level 2 in the next whatever. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, I see health, stamina, and mana. That's pretty much it. That's kind of Ultima. There are different skills and stuff under defense and attack and things like that. But I don't see any listings for actual, experience leveling up stuff. I will say the character graphics are very I compare them to Mount and Blade. You got some ugly people in this game, which is not it's basically from the sense of here are the graphics. We're a small team. We're not going to do too much here. Here's what you got.
Yeah, well, and we've talked about that. I know Drax has talked about that too. It's like, you build the art you can with the resources you have, and you make what compromises you have to, because at the end of the day, you want to release the game.
That's true. That is very true.
If you want to join the Ultima Dragons, you can do so at udic.org, where you can choose your very own dragon name. You can also find the Ultima Dragons on Facebook. We have a Facebook group there. And you can follow at Ultima Dragons on Twitter, or join them on Discord. And if you're feeling really old school, you can even fire up a Telnet client and check out the Weremount. Hit up the show notes for links to all of these. If you want to participate more directly in the podcast, you can send us an email, or if you're feeling a little bit braver, leave us a voice message in one of 3 places: the podcast website, our Facebook page, or on anchor.fm. And you're also welcome to join us on our Discord server to chat with us, to lurk, or even contribute to podcast recordings when they happen. And again, links in the show notes. If you'd like to support Spam Humbug, you can do so at patreon.com/ultimacodex, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to episodes the day before they go live to the general public. You'll also get access to behind-the-scenes audio when we have some to share, and possibly other interesting content. But we also welcome your moral support. You can like the Ultima series on Facebook, follow at Ultima Codex on Twitter, or leave the podcast a review on iTunes. And you're also welcome to share our episodes with your friends and social media circles. Spam Humbug is a production of the Ultima Codex. You can find show notes online at spamhumbug.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, be virtuous.